On the morning of my 70th birthday, I woke up completely bald in my luxurious home in the Chicago suburbs. When I looked in the mirror, the reflection staring back at me was unrecognizable. My head, once crowned with the gray hair I took such pride in, was completely shaved. On the nightstand beside my bed lay a cruel note. "Now you finally looked the part, you old busybody." It was my birthday, and my daughter-in-law, Brenda, had left me this devastating gift. What she didn't know was that I had been planning to transfer $5 million to her and my son that very evening. But now, everything was about to change. My revenge wouldn't just be served cold. It would be served with interest. Before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to Elderly Stories and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I sat on the edge of my bed, my trembling fingers exploring the smooth surface of my scalp. The tears streaming down my face weren't just from sadness. They were from rage, humiliation, and above all, profound disappointment. My daughter-in-law, Brenda, had entered my bedroom during the night and shaved my head while I slept soundly, knocked out by my medication. How could she do this? I whispered into the silence of my room. I picked up the note again, analyzing every word written on that perfumed paper. I recognized it from the expensive stationery store she frequented. The elegant handwriting contrasted sharply with the cruelty of the message. "Now you finally looked the part, you old busybody. Happy birthday." I took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in my hands. It was my 70th birthday. The celebration I had organized and paid for myself was scheduled to begin in just a few hours. All my friends, neighbors, and family would be there, and I was bald. But what hurt most wasn't the public humiliation awaiting me. It was a betrayal. After my husband passed away 10 years ago, I was the one who helped Daniel, my only son, get back on his feet. I paid off his debts, financed his business, and when he met Brenda, I welcomed her like the daughter I never had. For 3 years, I endured her snide comments about my antiquated house, my grandma clothes, and my old-fashioned habits. I put up with it when she started making small renovations to my house without consulting me. I pretended not to care when she began excluding me from family decisions, all because I loved my son and wanted to see him happy. And today, on my birthday, I had been planning to announce their gift, a $5 million transfer, half of my fortune, so they could buy their dream house in an exclusive Chicago neighborhood and expand Daniel's company. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my friend Sarah, who was supposed to arrive early to help with the final preparations. "Linda, I'll be there in half an hour. Do you need me to bring anything else?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Sarah, something happened." "What? Are you okay?" "No, I'm not. Could you stop at a wig shop on your way? It's urgent." Silence on the other end. "Wigs? Linda, what happened?" "I'll explain when you get here. Please, just be discreet." I hung up before she could ask more questions. I didn't want to discuss the details over the phone. I needed to think, to organize my feelings, to decide what to do. I looked in the mirror again. The woman staring back at me looked like a stranger. Without hair, my face appeared older, more vulnerable. Or perhaps that was just how I felt inside at that moment. I walked to the window and gazed out the garden I had cultivated myself for decades. The flowers I planted with my late husband, the trees I watched grow alongside my son. This house held a lifetime of memories, a life that seemed to be falling apart before my very eyes. My mind drifted to the previous evening. The family dinner had been tense, as had become common in recent months. Daniel, forever torn between pleasing his wife and not hurt his mother, remained quiet most of the time. Brenda, on the other hand, didn't hold back her comments about how the birthday party would be so much better in some chic event hall instead of this old house. This old house, as she called it, was a 3-story mansion in one of the most exclusive suburbs of Chicago, a property that gained value every year and which I intended to leave to my son. Or at least, that's what I had planned before this morning. Why had Brenda done this? What had I done to deserve such humiliation? The questions hammered in my head as I prepared for my shower. Perhaps she had finally shown her true colors. The mask of the devoted daughter-in-law had fallen, revealing the cruel, gold-digging woman my friends had tried to warn me about. Under the shower, I let the hot water cascade over my bare head, mixing with the tears I could no longer hold back. I cried bitterly, allowing myself to feel the full pain of the betrayal. But as the water turned cold, I felt another emotion growing inside me. Determination. She will not win, I whispered to myself. She will not destroy me. When I stepped out of the shower, something inside me had changed. The sadness gave way to a firm resolution. I would not be the victim in this story. I would not hide in shame on my own birthday. Brenda had underestimated me. She thought she knew me, thought she knew how I would react. She probably imagined I would cancel the party, too humiliated to face anyone. But she had no idea who I really was. The doorbell rang. I wrapped a towel around my head and went downstairs. It was Sarah, a worried expression on her face, and a large bag in her hands. "Linda, for God's sake, what happened?" I invited her in, and in silence, I removed the towel from my head. Sarah brought her hands to her mouth, horrified. "Who did this to you?" "Brenda," I replied with a calmness that surprised even me. "While I was sleeping." I handed her the note. Her eyes widened as she read it. "That viper. We have to call the police right now." I shook my head. "No, Sarah." I took the bag from her hands and pulled out the wig she had brought. There were 3 options: a blonde, a redhead, and a brunette, all elegant cuts appropriate for a woman my age. "Thank you for bringing these, but I'm not going to use them." "What do you mean? You can't show up at the party like this." A quiet smile formed on my lips. "Oh, I can and I will. In fact, I'm going to do something much better." I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I rarely used. It was time to talk to my lawyer. When Thomas, my longtime lawyer, answered the phone, my voice sounded firmer than I expected. "Thomas, I need you to cancel the transfer schedule for tonight, and I want you to prepare a change to my will immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Linda, is everything all right? You sound very serious." "I am perfectly fine, Thomas. In fact, I've never seen things more clearly. Can you come to my house now? I need those documents ready by the end of the day." As I hung up, I noticed Sarah's worried look. She had known me for over 4 decades and knew something drastic must have happened to make me change my mind about the $5 million transfer. "Linda, are you sure about what you're doing? Don't make any impulsive decisions." "It's not impulsive, Sarah. It's a course correction." I walked to the window again, watching the party preparations beginning in the garden. They showed me who they really are. Now it's my turn to show them who I am. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Thomas arrived, listened to my story with a grave expression, and got to work on the documents I requested. Meanwhile, the house was invaded by staff setting up tables, chairs, and decorations for the party. I decided not to hide. I walked among the preparations with my head held high and uncovered, ignoring the shocked looks and whispers. When the makeup artist I hired arrived, she hesitated for a moment upon seeing my bald head. "Ma'am, would you perhaps like to use a scarf or—" "That won't be necessary," I replied with a smile. "Just highlight my eyes. I want them to be the first thing people notice today." As the party time approached, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I put on the petroleum blue dress I had chosen weeks ago, elegant, sophisticated, and now perfectly matching my new look. Thomas returned with the documents ready to be signed. I read every page carefully before signing. "Are you sure about this, Linda?" he asked one last time. "It's a significant change." "Absolutely," I replied, handing him back the pen. "And a copy of this must stay with you until the opportune moment." The first guests began to arrive at 7 o'clock. The shock on their faces when they saw me was almost comical. Open mouths, wide eyes, stammered greetings. But I received everyone with the grace of an experienced hostess, thanking them for their presence and acting as if I was completely comfortable with my new appearance. "My goodness, Linda, what happened to your hair?" asked Martha, a nosy neighbor. "A transformation," I replied, smiling. "Sometimes you need to get rid of the old to make room for the new." The whispers spread to the party like wildfire. I noticed furtive glances and conversations that stopped when I approached. But I remained unfazed, circulating among the guests with a glass of champagne in my hand and a smile on my lips. At 8 o'clock sharp, Daniel and Brenda finally arrived. My son stopped at the entrance of the room, his jaw dropping when he saw me. Brenda at his side turned instantly pale. Clearly, she did not expect me to show up at the party, much less proudly display the result of her cruelty. I walked toward them with firm steps, noticing how she gripped Daniel's arm with increasing force as I got closer. "Mom," Daniel began, visibly disturbed. What happened to you?" "Ask your wife," I replied calmly. She left a very enlightening note about my new look. Daniel's eyes turned to Brenda, whose face was alternating between pale and flushed. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Don't worry," I continued, maintaining my smile. "The night is just beginning. We have a lot to celebrate." I turned my attention back to the other guests, leaving the couple paralyzed at the entrance. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel pulling Brenda into a corner, probably demanding explanations. The scene gave me a small satisfaction, but I knew the best was yet to come. The party continued. The food was impeccable, the music pleasant, the conversations flowed, though frequently interrupted by glances in my direction. Daniel tried to approach me several times, but I always avoided him elegantly, mingling with other guests. Brenda, on the other hand, seemed to have hidden herself in some corner of the mansion. At 10 o'clock, as planned, I asked for everyone's attention for a toast. The room fell silent, and all eyes focused on me in the center of the room. Daniel appeared from somewhere, dragging Brenda along by his side. His face was tense, hers terrified. "I want to thank you all for being here today, celebrating my 70 years. I began." My voice was clear and firm. "Life has been an extraordinary journey, full of joys, challenges, and surprises." I paused, running my hand over my bald head. Some guests looked away, embarrassed. As you can see, I decided to make a drastic change to my appearance. Some might call it a transformation. Others might call it what it really is, an act of cruelty committed while I was asleep. A murmur of astonishment swept the room. All eyes turned to Brenda, who looked like she wanted to disappear. But I'm not here to talk about that. I am here to celebrate life and the lessons it teaches us. The most important of which is, it is never too late to see the truth, even when it is right in front of our eyes. I signaled to Thomas, who approached with a folder in his hands. Today I was planning to announce the transfer of $5 million to my son and my daughter-in-law as a gift for them to buy their dream house. Daniel's eyes widened. Brenda, who looked like she was about to faint just minutes before, suddenly regained her color and looked directly at me. But I continued, I decided that a different gift would be more appropriate. I opened the folder Thomas handed me and took out a sealed envelope. This envelope contains my new will, signed and notarized today. In it, I stipulate that my fortune, currently valued at nearly $10 million, will be entirely allocated to creating a foundation for elderly women who are victims of violence and abuse. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the clinking of glasses and the distant hum of the air conditioning system. All eyes darted between me and the paralyzed couple in the corner of the room. This decision was not made out of revenge, but out of clarity. This morning, when I woke up and discovered what had been done to me, I realized that I had been living in an illusion for the past few years. I thought I was surrounded by love when in reality, I was surrounded by self-interest. Daniel finally found his voice, taking a few steps in my direction. "Mom, you can't be serious. Whatever happened?" "What happened?" I interrupted calmly. "What happened is that your wife entered my room during the night, shaved my head while I slept, and left this note." I handed him the paper. Daniel read it quickly, his expression changing from confusion to horror. He turned to Brenda, who was now visibly trembling. "Is this true?" I didn't think it was a joke." "A joke?" I repeated, my voice firmer now. "Shaving a 70-year-old woman's head without her consent, and then leaving a note calling her an old busybody? What a refined sense of humor you have, Brenda." The guests began to whisper among themselves. Some looked at Brenda with obvious contempt. But as I said, I continued, turning my attention back to everyone. I am here to celebrate, not to mourn. In fact, I should thank Brenda. Her act freed me from a dangerous illusion, and now I can live my remaining years with my eyes wide open. I raise my glass. A toast to new beginnings and the truth, however painful it may be. As the guests raise their glasses in an uncomfortable toast, I saw Daniel pulling Brenda out of the room. The argument that followed, though muffled by the walls, was clearly heated. I took a sip of champagne, feeling a strange mixture of pain and liberation. Sarah came over, squeezing my arm in solidarity. "Are you okay?" "I will be," I replied, watching the guests who were now clustering in small circles, no doubt discussing the drama they had just witnessed. And you know what's strangest? Somehow I feel lighter. The party continued, albeit with completely altered atmosphere. Some guests said goodbye early, clearly uncomfortable. Others stayed, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of genuine concern for me. Daniel returned alone about half an hour later. His face was pale, his eyes red. He approached hesitantly. "Can we talk in private?" I nodded and led him to the study, away from prying eyes. As soon as I closed the door, he collapsed into an armchair, covering his face with his hands. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know what she had done." "I believe you," I replied, sitting across from him. "But that doesn't change the fact that you allowed this to happen." He looked up confused. How could I stop something I didn't know was going to happen? "I'm not just talking about today, Daniel. I'm talking about the last 3 years. About her derogatory comments that you ignored, the small humiliations you pretended not to see, the way you repeatedly chose your comfort over my dignity." My son looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I always knew Brenda was," I continued, "but I chose to believe that the love she felt for you would change her, would make her kinder, more considerate. That was my mistake." "She's leaving," Daniel said suddenly. "I told her to pack her bags." I can't even look at her after this." I sighed. "I am not asking you to get a divorce, Daniel. I am just stating the truth that has been in front of us all this time." "And what about the will? Are you really disinheriting us?" I looked at my son, the child I had rocked, the teenager I had guided, the man who had become a stranger to me. I felt a pang of sadness, but my resolution held firm. "Yes, my decision is made. The money will go to the foundation." Daniel stood up abruptly. "So that's it. 40 years of a relationship thrown in the trash because of one mistake Brenda made." "It wasn't just one mistake, Daniel. It was a culmination of years of disrespect. And I am not the one throwing our relationship in the trash. You've been doing that little by little every time you allowed her to belittle me, every time you chose to look the other way." He walked to the door, stopping with his hand on the knob. "You're going to regret this, Mom. You're acting on impulse, out of spite." "Perhaps," I replied calmly, "but I would rather regret acting with dignity than continue to be treated like an inconvenient burden in my own home." When I returned to the living room, the party was already breaking up. I thanked each guest for coming, ignoring the looks of pity some gave me. When the last of them had left, I sat alone in the garden, watching the stars. I ran my hand over my bare head, feeling the strange new texture in my scalp. Somehow, that violation had liberated me. The hair would grow back, but I would never be the same person again. And maybe that was a good thing. In the days that followed, the news of what happened at my birthday party spread quickly through the city. My phone didn't stop ringing. Worried friends, curious acquaintances, even local journalists wanted to hear my inspiring story of resistance to domestic abuse, as one of them described it. I declined all interviews and kept my conversations brief. I didn't want to be turned into a heroic victim or expose the details of my private life any further. Daniel moved temporarily into a hotel. Brenda, from what I heard through Sarah, had gone to her parents' house. The few times my son called me, our conversations were tense and superficial. He oscillated between apologies and veiled attempts to make me reconsider my decision about the will. 1 week after the party, I was having breakfast on the terrace when the intercom rang. It was Brenda, asking to come in. I hesitated. part of me wanted to order her to never set foot on my property again. Another part was curious about what she could possibly have to say. Finally, I authorized her entry. When she appeared on the terrace, I barely recognized her. The woman who was always impeccable, with perfect makeup and designer clothes, looked defeated. No makeup, dressed in simple jeans and a basic blouse. Her eyes were swollen, as if she had been crying for days. "Mrs. Linda," she began, her voice trembling. "Sit down, Brenda," I interrupted, indicating the chair opposite me. "Would you like some coffee?" She nodded, seeming surprised by my civility. I poured her a cup and waited for her to speak. "I came to apologize," she finally said, her eyes fixed on the cup. "What I did, it was unforgivable." "Yes, it was," I agreed calmly. "What I want to understand is why." Brenda finally lifted her eyes, meeting mine. I was angry, frustrated. Daniel told me about the $5 million transfer, and instead of being happy, I was furious because you hadn't consulted us about what we want to do with the money. I raised an eyebrow. That's a curious thing to be angry about, receiving a $5 million gift. She looked away. It sounds absurd now, I know, but that night, after you went to bed, I started complaining to Daniel about how you always controlled everything, how you never really accepted me into the family. And he disagreed? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "No," she admitted. He agreed with me. He said you had always been controlling, that you always wanted to dictate the terms of everything. That confession hurt more than I expected. My own son talking about me like that behind my back. I kept drinking wine and getting more and more irritated, Brenda continued. I was thinking about all the times you corrected me in front of other people, the times you interfered in our decisions. I gave advice. I corrected. I never forced you to do anything. To you, it was advice. To us, it felt like constant judgment. She ran a hand through her hair nervously. Anyway, when Daniel went to bed, I kept drinking. I found those clippers in your bathroom. The ones I use to trim my ends. I completed. Yes, and I had this terrible idea. I thought it would be, I don't know, a way to show that you couldn't control everything, that you were vulnerable too. She covered her face with her hands. It was monstrous. I was drunk, but that's no excuse. I watched her for a long moment. There was sincerity in her regret. I didn't doubt that. But there was also something else, a revelation about the dynamic that existed in my family without me fully realizing it. "Do you and Daniel talk about me behind my back often?" Brenda hesitated, but then nodded. "Yes, he resents a lot of things. The way you raised him with a firm hand after his father died. The expectations you always placed on him. The fact that you never really let him take the reins of his own life. Each word was like a small sting. I had dedicated my life to giving Daniel everything he needed, security, education, opportunities. I never imagined he would interpret my love as control. Daniel has never said any of this to me. He's afraid of hurting you," she replied, "and also afraid of losing your financial support, to be honest." Something inside me broke at that moment. It wasn't just Brenda who had betrayed me. My son had been a silent accomplice for years, complaining about my interference while accepting my money. "I understand," I said finally. "Thank you for your honesty, however late it is. Mrs. Linda, I know what I did is unforgivable, but I am truly sorry. I never wanted things to get to this point. What did you expect to happen, Brenda? That I would wake up bald, read your cruel note, and just what? Keep pretending everything was fine? Transfer the $5 million as if nothing happened? I wasn't thinking about the consequences," she admitted. "I was acting on impulse, on built-up resentment." I sighed, suddenly exhausted by this conversation, by this situation, by this whole family drama. "What do you want from me now, Brenda? Forgiveness? For me to drop the police report? To reverse my decision about the will?" She looked genuinely surprised. You filed a police report?" "Of course I did. What you did is assault. It's a crime." Brenda paled even more. "I didn't realize." "Obviously. You were too busy feeling justified in your cruelty to think about the real consequences. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, she stood up. I'll understand if you want to press charges. I won't fight them. What I did was wrong, and I'm willing to face the consequences. I watched her walk to the door, her shoulders slumped, so different from the arrogant woman I knew. Brenda, I called out when she was almost gone. Why did you really marry Daniel? She stopped without turning around. At first, it was for love. After, I think it was more for the lifestyle, for the security. She turned to look at me one last time. I'm not the villain you think I am, Mrs. Linda. I'm just an imperfect person who made a terrible, terrible mistake. After she left, I sat for a long time, reflecting on our conversation. Despite the anger I still felt, something had shifted. Brenda's brutal honesty had shed light on aspects of my relationship with Daniel that I had never seen clearly. Maybe I had been too controlling. Maybe my way of loving or protecting had suffocated my son in ways I didn't perceive. This didn't justify Brenda's cruelty, but offered a context I could no longer ignore. I picked up the phone and called Thomas. I need to make another change to the will, I said as soon as he answered, and I want to withdraw the complaint we filed against Brenda. In the month that followed, I saw little of Daniel or Brenda. I learned through mutual friends that they had reconciled and were living together again, albeit in a rented apartment much smaller than the house they had planned to buy with my money. My hair began to grow, short and surprisingly grayer than before. I decided to keep it that way, a short, practical cut that ironically made me look younger and more modern. As Sarah joked, Brenda accidentally did you a stylistic favor. Weeks turned into months. Life went on. I started attending meetings with the legal team that was structuring my foundation. I discovered a passion I never knew I had, helping vulnerable older women, many with stories far worse than mine. Daniel, and I found a new rhythm in our relationship. We had dinner together once a week, usually on Wednesdays. We started talking about topics we had avoided for decades, his childhood frustrations, my fears as a single mother, memories of his father that I kept only to myself. Brenda still didn't participate in these dinners. I wasn't ready for that, and she seemed to understand. Occasionally, Daniel would mention that she asked about me, that she wanted to make peace someday, but he didn't press the issue. One Wednesday in April, Daniel arrived for our dinner with a different expression, a mixture of nervousness and excitement I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager. Mom, I have a business idea I want to discuss with you. I served the dinner, a mushroom risotto I had learned in a cooking class I started attending, and listened as he described his plan. It's an app aimed specifically at seniors, he explained excitedly. Not just for entertainment or communication with family, but for access to essential services, from telemedicine to grocery shopping, hiring hourly caregivers, even an integrated emergency button. I watched his growing enthusiasm as he described the details, the market research he had already started, the professionals he wanted to hire. What do you think? He finally asked, looking at me with an expression that mixed pride and vulnerability. I think it's a brilliant idea, Daniel. Genuinely innovative and necessary. His face lit up at my praise, and I realized how much that still mattered to him. I have some savings to start, he continued, but not enough to develop the full app and launch it properly. He paused. I was thinking about the trust you mentioned in the will. I put my fork down, understanding where this was going. You're thinking about accessing it now? Daniel nodded. I know the intention was for me to only have access after you. Well, but I thought maybe we could advance a part of it as an investment. The foundation could even be a partner since the target audience overlaps. I considered his proposal. It had merit, no doubt, and it was exactly the kind of initiative I had imagined when I set the conditions. Let's do this, I suggested after a few moments of reflection. Prepare a detailed business plan. Present it to the foundation's board, just like you would to any investor. If they approve, and I will not be present at that meeting so as not to influence the decision, the foundation can come in as a minority investor. That would be perfect, Daniel replied, visibly moved. Thank you. Thank you for taking it seriously. It's a good idea, Daniel. It deserves to be taken seriously. We continued dinner, talking about the app's details, potential challenges, the market, It was the first time in years I had seen him so passionate about a project, so connected to a purpose greater than just making money. When we were having coffee on the terrace, Daniel suddenly turned serious. Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. Something in his tone made me apprehensive. Brenda's pregnant. We're having a baby. The cup nearly slipped from my hand. Of all the possible news, this was the last thing I expected. Pregnant. Daniel smiled nervously. Not really planned. It was a surprise for us too, especially considering, well, everything that's happened in the last few months. I tried to process the information. I was going to be a grandmother. The woman who had shaved my head while I slept, who had called me an old busybody, was going to be the mother of my grandchild. I know it's complicated, Daniel continued, noticing my silence. And I completely understand if you don't want to be a part of this, considering your relationship with Brenda. No, I interrupted, surprised by my own response. It's not that. I need a moment to take this in. Daniel waited patiently while I sorted through my thoughts. When is she due? October. She's almost 3 months along now. October. The baby would be born right around my birthday. There was a certain poetic irony in that. Do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Not yet. Brenda wanted to be a surprise, to wait until the birth to find out. I nodded. Try to imagine what it would be like to hold a baby in my arms again after so much time. The last time I'd done that was with Daniel, over 4 decades ago. Does she know you're telling me? Yes, he replied. In fact, she wanted to come with me today to tell you personally, but I thought it would be better if I prepared the ground first. I got up and walked to the railing of the terrace, looking out at the night garden. The first stars were already appearing in the sky, pinpricks of light in the growing darkness. Daniel, what happened between Brenda and me was serious. It wasn't a simple family fight or a difference of opinion. It was a violation, a deliberate humiliation. I know, Mom, and she knows it too. At the same time, I continued, there's a child involved now, my grandchild, and as complicated as our feelings are for each other, I don't want that child to grow up in the middle of a cold family war. Daniel looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. What does that mean? It means I'm willing to try to build a civil relationship with Brenda. We won't be friends. We probably never will be. But we can learn to coexist peacefully for the sake of the child. The next day, Brenda appeared at my door. I was surprised but invited her in. She looked different, softer somehow, less guarded. We sat in the living room, an awkward silence stretching between us. Mrs. Linda, she began, Daniel told you about the baby? He did. I wanted to come and tell you myself, but I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me. I studied her face. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't seen before. I'm glad you came. She looked surprised. You are... Brenda, we're going to be connected for the rest of our lives now, whether we like it or not. We can either make that unbearable or we can try to find a way forward. She nodded slowly. I would like that very much. And I want you to know that I am truly sorry. Not just for what I did that night, but for everything. For the way I treated you for years, the malicious comments, the disrespect. The therapy seems to be doing you good, I commented, remembering Daniel had mentioned their couple sessions. It is, she confirmed. I've learned a lot about myself in these last few months, about my own issues with authority figures, about how I projected resentments I had with my own mother onto you. I took a sip of tea, digesting her words. I had never thought of myself as a figure reminiscent of Brenda's mother. What's your relationship with your mother like? I asked, genuinely curious. Brenda hesitated, as if not expecting the question. Difficult. She was always very critical, never satisfied with anything I did. When I met Daniel, and especially when I met you, so successful, so in control of everything, I think I transferred a lot of that dynamic to our relationship. You never mentioned that before. It's not something I like to discuss. And honestly, I only started understanding it in therapy. She paused. It doesn't justify what I did, of course. It just helps explain it. We sat in silence.